Nancy gets me sometimes.
I came to him with the grandpa.
So good to see you.
We're here to honor the Catskill Center and the people who helped found it at the beginning, of which Peter and I are two.
Very good. Would you like to?
Early. And Sherret Chase.
How are you?
Yes. Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for getting this thing going
Thank you.
and keeping it going.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. Behind our back. Nancy gets me sometimes.
I came to him with the grandpa.
So good to see you.
Good morning, everyone. It is so wonderful to see old friends, new friends, and the warmth and greetings of what I like to call kindred spirits, as the symbol of what it means to be in love with the Catskills and the Catskill region. That is what binds us, that's what brings us here today, that's what binds us all together, our shared commitment and love of place, and of the role that this place has had in the history of not only this area, but of this region and of the country in terms of arts and environmental concerns. We have been both the magnificent history and the cutting edge of all of those movements. And we're here on the 44th anniversary of the founding of the Catskill Center to honor one of our founders and our first president, and we will be doing that today. It calls to mind, and this will be a very bad paraphrase, some of Winston Churchill's great lines, such as, never in the history of human conflict have so many owed so much to so few. That was corny, but corny is the theme of the day. Corn has been a central theme of our founders' scientific and professional life. So please excuse the bad jokes. There will be, I hope, many and often and terrible. Let me just also, just for a moment, ask the people who share the leadership of this organization with me, our board of directors, all those members here, to please stand and to be recognized for their role in helping continue the great work of this organization. We will hear from him later, but I just wanted to be sure to recognize we are honored to have Assemblyman Pete Lopez with us. Is Pete here?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We'll be hearing from him in just a moment. We have a very full program, so let's get right to it. And I'll now turn over things to our magnificent executive director, who has really brightened the flame and carried the torch in a stunning fashion. We are deeply grateful to him and look forward to his leadership for a very long time to come. Alan White.
Because the overall theme of the day today is to honor someone that I'm privileged to call a friend, Sherret Chase. And that will be a majority of our program this morning. But before we get to that, let me give you a few highlights from the past year at the Catskill Center. This last year we have had a focus on public land. It's been one of the things that we spent some time on, and I think if you get an opportunity to go into the main meeting room of the building, you'll see some display on design for the Interpretive Center, because it's something the Catskill Center has long wished for, to have an interpretive center for the public land in the Catskills. And again, in recognition of Sherry, that's been one of his dreams. And I'm very humble and very pleased to be able to take some of the dreams that Sherry has created and see if we can move them forward. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about the Interpretive Center later. We did an economic impact study for the public land in the Catskills. Because what we really wanted to do is start to think about, as we try to piece the Catskills economy back together, we know that natural resource tourism is going to be one of the things that's going to be part of the foundation. So we did a study, and we've been very surprised to learn that the Catskill Park gets 1.7 million visitors a year, and they have an economic impact of about $46 million. And I would say, in a general sense, that that's without trying very hard. In terms of if we went to the two major landowners of public land in the Catskills, New York State DEC or New York City DEP, and we said, what's your budget to promote the public land in the Catskills? They would probably say not much. In terms of, I think they piece it together, they do the best we can. But as we think about growing our economy in sustainable ways, we think the public land is very important. So when we look at an economic impact of $46 million and not much of a promotion effort so far, and we look at things like the Interpretive Center that need to be built, we feel that we can grow the economy in that way, and a 10 or 15 or 20% increase in visitation to the Catskill Park would not hurt the resource, but would certainly help our economy. This year we organized the first ever Catskill Park Awareness Day, where groups of volunteers from the Catskills went up to Albany and met with each of the 8 representatives, the legislative representatives for the Catskill Park, and talked about the importance of the park to us and to our communities. And I think that's an effort that was highly successful, and I'm hoping that will be the first of many, many years. And I think, as Pete Lopez will tell you, to be effective in Albany, you don't go once. You have to go, and you have to have a consistent message. We've also formed a Catskill Park Advisory Committee, because we think that the public will have an increasing interest in helping guide the future activities on our public land. The staff member here that has been responsible for majority of the logistics and activities in this effort, in our concentration on public land, has been Jonathan Moglever. Jonathan is here somewhere.
He just went in the building.
He's in the building, so if you get a chance, say hello to him. And just to give you an example of our long-term interest in the public land in the Catskills, as we sit here today, there are 5 fire towers open, and they are manned by volunteers that are up in the cab of those fire towers, interpreting for those visitors what they see as they look out across the Catskills. And that's an example of the strength of the Catskill Center. We continue to work with that volunteer program. We help refurbish those fire towers, and those fire towers contribute almost 20% of the hiking to the Catskill Park. So that's an important program for us. This year we launched a new website. We have an active Facebook page. We have a new logo. We're basically moving more quickly into the era of electronic communications. And I want to recognize one of our staff members, Nicole Avente, who's in the back of the room. Nicole McShane, thank you. Recently married. And basically, Nicole has been the person that has picked up a lot of the work on that. We have a very active program in arts and culture. I would encourage you today to go in and look at the quilt exhibit in the gallery. The quilters actually use the Center every Monday and do quilting, and we were very pleased to offer them an opportunity to show their work, a very traditional form of art in the Catskills. We have an active artist in residency program at Platte Clove. So today, for example, there is an artist from somewhere in the country that's spending a week there doing work. And that's our Platte Clove Preserve is a key part of our land portfolio, receiving thousands of visitors a year. We have some catnap programs which we're starting to train volunteers with natural resource programming. We have a series of educational programs that are active and vibrant, and I want to recognize Katie Palm in the back of the room as the staff person that is most responsible for those. We continue to operate as a land trust at the Catskill Center. We have easements on 18 property. We own a number of properties. And a little later, Nicole is going to talk about a property that we just inherited. We're calling it the Thorn Preserve. Not yet open for activities, but we think this preserve will highlight our continued interest in stream science and riparian areas. We have a very active program in invasive species. I think, as many of you know, we have a significant threat at this point in time from emerald ash borer. We're anticipating a significant impact and the loss of ash trees throughout the Catskills. One of the first outbreaks was in Saugerties, and since then it's continued to move west across the Catskills. One of our strategies with that particular pest at this point in time is working with the federal government on the release of biocontrols. And so I want to recognize Teresa Murphy. Teresa is our SCA intern that is working actively on the release of biocontrols. And she has a handout if you're interested in more information on that. But the Catskill Center is actually on a regular basis working to release and monitor populations of some stingless parasitic wasps that we hope will help recalibrate our ecosystem, and maybe we won't lose all of our ash trees. We do a fair number of programs dealing with regional policy. I think, as everyone knows, the Catskill Center has been very active in the development and review of a compromise for Bel Air Mountain, and that comment period just closed. We did submit written comments on hydrofracking and expressed some significant concerns on hydrofracking, particularly in relation to its activity in the Catskill Park. Based on the display we have out here, last year one of our themes was sustainable energy. This year we've taken the next step on sustainable energy by purchasing a plug-in hybrid, which we are charging at least partially with solar power. And so from our perspective, the Catskill Center having the ability to attract funds, demonstrate new technology, and help people in the Catskills learn that this technology is becoming relatively mature, it's accessible, economically viable, and we now project a return on our investment in our solar arrays to the tune of maybe 6 to 7 years, which I think is getting to the point in time where we should adopt that technology. And to put it in perspective for you, the solar arrays on the ground, the 13 panels there, that's about what it would take to run an electric car. And so from our perspective, it's time to do that. So we've stepped forward and demonstrated some of those practices. We have an installation demonstration that we're working on in the meeting room. It's not quite done. You can go look. We basically took one wall and used 4 or 5 different installation techniques. And that, from our perspective, is probably one of the biggest things we can do from a sustainability standpoint. Today at our annual meeting, you're going to notice at lunch that you'll have the opportunity to participate in our Zero Waste Initiative. We're working very hard here to try to figure out how to green our activities. All of the materials that you will be using to consume lunch, in terms of the plates, the forks, the cups, they're all compostable. And so we would ask you to help us with that effort. Before I sign off, I want to introduce the rest of our team. First of all, Trudy Sheldon, who's our office manager, is in the back corner. Standing next to her is Susan Blake, who does our bookkeeping. We have a total of 3 interns. I introduced Teresa. We also have Corey Smith and Samira Deer, who are parking cars, etc. And an interesting connection on our use of interns. I've come to the conclusion that one of our products at the Catskill Center is the opportunity to train young people in conservation careers. And I think one example of a success that was held long before my time, Francis Beinecke, who is now the president of NRDC, was an intern at the Catskill Center. And so we have been successful, and I think, in helping people launch careers. At this point, I'm going to turn the program over to Getty Svaikauskas. Getty is a past president of the Catskill Center, an active member of our board, and Getty is going to lead as Master of Ceremonies. Are you up next? Oh, I'm sorry, guys. The next thing we will do is finish our election process. Mark Lee Boyer, who's a member of the board and chair of the nominating committee, will walk us through that. Thank you.
Hello, I don't want to rob you of Getty for any longer than I have to, but it's my pleasure to announce the nominees to the Board of Directors for the Catskill Center and to conduct the election. The nominees are Susan Clark of Bovina, Sybil Golden of New York and Olive Bridge, Laura Hussey of Delhi, Jan Jaffe of New York and Pine Hill, Patty Rudge of Big Indian, and Claude Shostall of New York and Woodstock. And we have proxy ballots sufficient to elect all of these directors, but pro forma we should do a proper election now. So if I can have all members in favor of this slate, say aye. Aye. And any opposed? The nominees are elected. And now I'm going to turn it back to Alan, and who will turn it back together. Thank you.
Like we're playing football. So the major theme of our meeting today is to honor Sherret Chase, and I'm going to ask Getty to come up and start that process. We have a number of speakers that have requested the opportunity to celebrate Sherry's accomplishments. Getty.
We pride ourselves on our brisk elections, as you notice. We're here today to praise a famous man. And what better to praise a famous man than another famous man? A person who has been on the board for decades, who was the founding director of the Natural Resources Defense Council and a friend of the Catskill Center for the last 43.96 years. In one of Sherry's writings, he mentions that this guy came up to in a little tent and sat at the back of a meeting of the Catskill Center and said to the woman, who's the Sherret Chase guy? I'm here to look him over. And it turned out to be Sherry's wife that he was talking to. I don't know whether she gave him the information or not, but he's here today. John, we appreciate your support of the organization and of Sherry for the past decades. One could not ask for a better friend. John Adams.
You're stealing my lines. Well, first of all, to see the Chase family here, it tells you an awful lot about Sherry and Kenny, and to see this wonderful family and the family they have. And I just, I want to recognize the wonderful family. And my wife is here, Patricia, and she's been a part of the Catskill Center with me during these 43.9 years. And I want to say, I look over and I see Peter Borelli, and I see our minister from Roscoe, and I see Paul Keller, and so many wonderful old friends that I'm just astounded that we're all here together to celebrate with Sherry. So let me get on with my remarks. He's one of my heroes, and certainly one of the Catskills' greatest leaders. So I feel very honored to have a chance to say a few words about this man that I admire so much. And it was 40 years ago, more. I read an article, I believe, in the Sullivan County Democrat that an organization called the Catskill Center for Conservation and Development was holding a meeting, and I thought it was at Cass Inn in Margaretville to introduce themselves to the public. That's my recollection. In my recollection, I was greeted at the door by a lovely woman named Kenny, who told me to go in and she would introduce me to the folks later at the next break. The other story is probably true and my recollection is bad. But how lucky I was to be introduced to the center just as I was building the Natural Resources Defense Council. Both organizations were in their infancy and trying out various approaches. Am I not speaking? Okay. Can you all hear? Yeah. Better. Okay. So we were working on various approaches to building the two institutions. NRDC was writing laws like the Clean Air Act and regulations for those acts, building a nationwide membership, and opening a Washington office. The center was trying to build a strong local base, initiate programs that would enhance the public communities, strengthen the local economies. Two very different approaches, yet lessons were there to be learned from both places. I also had my own personal reasons to want to find out what the center was doing. I grew up on a farm in Catskill Center in the western Catskills, and after law school, Patricia, my wife, and I bought an old farm in the old town of Beaverkill. None of the towns had much planning or zoning. Farms were going out of business. Our beautiful towns were heading in the wrong direction. I was looking for answers to the problems in the western Catskills, and the center seemed like the right place to start. And it proved to be what I hoped for. Led by Sherrett, along with a wonderful collection of people from all walks of life who were dedicated to making life in the Catskills better, Sherrett wanted the center to be a big tent, and he quickly accomplished that. Some of the earliest meetings I attended discussed preserving the old railroad lines, using radio and television for educational purposes in the rural Catskill areas. Efforts were made to protect the John Barrow's home, the great painter Thomas Cole's home, and meanwhile, teams of students worked with Sherrett and particularly with Bill Ginsberg on studies of the Catskill assets and issues for presentation to the Catskill Study Commission. And as was mentioned, Frances Beinecke, now the president of NRDC, who has worked at NRDC, we just celebrated her 40th anniversary at NRDC, came up here and worked as an intern. And she was working on materials for the study commission. And at her 40th anniversary birthday party this week, we had a nice celebration lunch for her. One of the things she talked about was her love of the Catskills and how much good it did her, and it has in fact helped her distinguished career by helping her to become an environmental advocate and an environmental scientist, and she is a fabulous talent. So who is the leader who brought ideas, enthusiasm, and charisma to the Catskills? Well, of course, it's the great Sherret Chase. He's a local man from Ashokan, whose grandfather in 1920 purchased the land that Sherrett and the Chase family live on. Sherrett's father was a Cornell graduate, an engineer. His mother was a Wells College graduate. His father was a successful engineer, a partner in an engineering firm in Pennsylvania, and he was a bridge builder. And Sherrett and his father had a very close relationship. But unfortunately, his father died when Sherrett was 15. And his mother, who by all accounts was a wonderful person, assumed the leadership role in the family, making sure that Sherrett and his brother and sister were well educated, well traveled, and seeking a bright and adventuresome life. Sherrett's extended family at Ashokan, including one aunt, Carmela, is that correct? Carmelita, who was a founder of the Putney School in Vermont, invited Sherrett to be a part of the opening of that school, and he led a group of students during the summer just prior to the opening of the Putney School. So he's lived in many places and has done many things, but he always returns to Ashokan in our wonderful Catskills. His background is known to most of you, but I want to highlight some things that drew me to him. First and foremost, he's a dedicated family man. With Kenny, he built a great family that has been a pleasure to watch. They're all forces for nature and a great source of pride for Sherrett, and were a great source of pride for Kenny. Their service to the Catskills will continue, surely, for years to come. He's always been a great adventurer, from his hikes and mountain climbing as a boy to exploring Alaska, remote parts of Alaska, to kayaking in the Hudson and the Delaware rivers and wherever a kayaking challenge existed. He's a world traveler, always seeking more information and ideas At 90 plus, his adventures have not stopped. In fact, he recently invited Patricia and me to join him and his family on a trip to Nova Scotia. His mind is a powerful tool. His education was in philosophy and botany, and he started at college in Arizona where his brother was attending college, switched to Yale. His mother somehow switched him from Arizona to Yale. I don't know how she did that, but it sounds like a pretty good trick. Then to Cornell for his graduate work and ultimately his PhD. He was a teacher and a researcher at Iowa State. Corn brought him to Iowa State. This is the railroad that the center worked on. He was a teacher at Oswego, a Cabot Fellow at Harvard, and of course his work as a researcher at important research institutions is the reason he is widely known. Most of all, he's a farmer and a forester, and he's still trying to grow hybrid chestnut trees to replace the lost American chestnut. And I'm one of his many chestnut outposts in the Beaver Kill, not very successfully, but I'm one of his team. Finally, a fact unknown to me until recently, Sherrett left Cornell Graduate School to join the Air Force as a second lieutenant. He served until World War II ended. He was a navigator on a B-24 that flew over 50 missions over Europe. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and other medals. After the war, with Kenny and the two children, his two oldest children, he returned to Cornell to complete his PhD. In many ways, Sherrett is a modest man. Never once have I heard him refer to his 3 years in World War II. Part of his success was Kenny. I was told a story by Kenny, at least I think she told me, my recollection is she told me. Kenny's family was living in Maryland in the 1940s, and she met Sherrett at a party and invited him to come the next day to the Compton farm for lunch. Never one to turn down a pretty lady or a lunch, Sherrett went to Kenny's family farm. He was met by Mrs. Compton, and now we have Compton Chase sitting here. Mrs. Compton, Kenny's mother, and she told Sherrett that she wanted him to accompany an older gentleman friend to see a field of growing corn. He happened to be Vice President Wallace, who was growing a hybrid crop on the Compton farm. And Vice President Wallace removed his shoes when they got to the field and took off his shoes and socks and said, "I like to feel the dirt between my toes." Sounds like Sherrett. And I believe that began a close friendship with the Vice President and likely influenced Sherrett's decision about his career in hybrids, including the growing of corn. When Sherrett was at Harvard on his fellowship in the late 1960 and thinking of moving east on a permanent basis, he wrote an article for the American Forestry Association titled Catskills Past, Present, and Future. The article expressed concern for the future of the Catskill. The article was picked up by the Margaretville newspaper, and Kingdon Gould read that article and found it expressed many of his concerns for the region. Mr. Gould organized a small meeting at Mohonk Mountain House, and as a result, a new organization, the Catskill Center for Conservation and Development, was born. In his role as the president of the Catskill Center, Sherrett pushed for a temporary commission to study the Catskills. In 1971, he wrote a letter to Governor Rockefeller requesting the commission, and partly because of that letter, shortly thereafter, the commission was established. And in 1975, it issued a report that mirrored Sherrett's concerns and findings. The years since then, the report have been busy ones for the Catskill Center. You'll be hearing about various projects. You've heard about some of them already, and some of the wonderful, talented folks that have joined Sherrett over the years at the Catskill Center. People like Ruth Reynolds and Getty and the wonderful Stan Breyer Bill Ginsberg and his son Josh, and Peter Borelli, who worked at NRDC and the Open Space Institute with me, and the two Toms, Tom Miner and Tom Allworth and David Side. These are all, David Side, the legendary lawyer, Bill and Sybil Golden, and Claude Shostel and Alan White. It's a wonderful collection of people and so many more that I haven't mentioned, but I had to get some of those names on the table because they're so wonderful. Over the years, working with Sherry in a center, it's felt like family. Both my daughter Kate, she was an intern here in the 1980s, and my son Ramsey, who's the Catskill Mountain Keeper, have had important relationships with Sherrett and the center. Ramsey has been supporting the Interpretive Center and working on other local issues with your wonderful executive director, Alan White. And so the seeds spread by Sherrett connect us all together and will continue to do so into the future. So Sherrett, thank you for your gift to all of us, your years of love and dedication to the Catskills, and especially your friendship.
Thank you, John. That was very nice. I have a note here from Kingdon Gould, who I like the postscript best of all, but I just want to read one sentence. Please extend to Sherry our additional thank you for having ably presided over the organization for a dozen years and his splendid life devoted to the environment. And the postscript says, the reason we will not be with you Saturday to join him in honoring him in person is that we are hosting 85 friends for lunch the same day. So we forgive him. I'm a journalist. Journalists and politicians have pretty much the same modus operandi. We tolerate anybody who will tolerate us. And we have today two absolutely wonderful specimens of the Homus politicus, Pete Lopez and Maurice Hinchey, who just came in. And we very much appreciate their participation in the community dialogue which we seek to be an important part of. It's with people like that that we can play the role, get to know some of the other players, inculcate them in the values of the Catskill Center. So we're so pleased to have you both here, Maurice and Pete. And Pete, would you like to say a few words?
Well, thank you, Getty, and Claude and Alan, members of the board. I've been listening, taking the discussion, and I realized that we don't have enough corn in this discussion. So I'm just going to throw out a corny joke. We have, our family loves puns and horrible corny jokes. This is very short and very painful. A friend of mine said to me, Pete, why can't a bicycle stand by itself? Any brave souls out there? Because it's too tired. Oh, I'm sorry. So I had to throw some corn in to start with, but it's very painful, I promised. For those of you I haven't met, there are many familiar faces. My name is Pete, Assemblyman Pete Lopez. I represent a 7-county region, Northern Catskills, Mid-Hudson, and Southern Tier. And I have to say, it's a privilege to be in this role. This has been my home since I was 12. I'm 52 now. And being here today is very much a coming home for me in many ways. I have to commend the board first for its selection of Alan White as your current director. I've known Alan professionally. Alan is intelligent, he's engaging, he's pragmatic, thoughtful individual, And in my mind, that selection is very much reflective of the collective consciousness of this board. My background is in environmental studies on public management. And my belief, and this is really, in my mind, the heart and soul of the center, is the issue of stewardship. And we hear synonyms, we hear reference to sustainability, and that has many different connotations. Many people approach it and look at it differently, interpret it. But from my standpoint, I think a steward also provides a meaningful capturing of the intent and purpose of the center. And as I think about being a steward, I think about clothing, feeding, providing for our community. But at the same time, we are also thoughtfully ensuring that the resources that we have available to us are provided to the next generation. And that by doing so, we work in ways that we don't spoil our own nest. And what that requires, a few things. First, it requires patience, and we heard Getty talk about patience. And I guess my take on it we mentioned politician, I prefer public servant. We love everyone. Some people we love more than others. I think that goes with the territory. But I think the issue of inclusiveness and bringing people together, constructive tension, is critical. The other portion about being a steward is and being inclusive is bringing people, regardless of where they come from, regardless of their philosophies, their training, their background, and work in a direction that's in everyone's common interest. And I'll just share a quick example, and then I do want to get on to honor Sherry directly. I had a conversation with a person in Saugerties who was taking umbrage at use of public funds to support dairy farmers, who we know in this region continue to suffer and in many ways are on the verge of extinction in New York State, particularly in this region. And her words were, I don't want money to subsidize dairy farmers, I want money for farmland preservation. And I said, ma'am, I understand, and I said, certainly in areas of our region, particularly high growth areas where there are heavy demands for development, it's an intelligent, thoughtful tool to help make sure that farmland is available. But I said, what good is that farmland if the family farmer who we value is not able to make a living? And she gave that some thought, and she said, Pete, you're right. And so in that regard, we're able to bring people together, different vocabulary, sustainability, carbon footprint, 100-mile diet, safe food, local food. That's one dialect. The other dialect, and you'll hear this more from Cornell, economic multiplier, value from the farm gate. Another subculture, if you would, but it's driving towards a common denominator of supporting family farms. And really that's what this is the opportunity and the challenge of this institution. So back to Sherry. I had the privilege of being a founding member of just a chapter of Habitat for Humanity in my home county. And I see that chapter now, 20 years later, still doing good work and still engaged. Being the president and one of the co-founders of an institution like this, and being able to see the institution blossom and engage, to me, and I have to believe for Sherry, will make him smile. And I see a little smile from him right now. And the smile is not one of pride or self-aggrandizement. It's a modest smile, seeing work well done and seeing the fruits of his labors take hold. And so for Sherry and his board, that work must continue. And so I do want to say I was very impressed with the background. To hear his service makes an assemblyman feel very small, because the service and the engagement is certainly praiseworthy. I want to say to you, from my experience and from my engagement, that we're very proud of you. And there's a quick saying from Abraham Lincoln. It says, I'd like to see a man live to be proud of the place where he resides. I also like to see a man live so that his place may be proud of him. And I think that's really the sentiment captured today. And so for Sherry, if I can present this citation from the State Assembly with our gratitude. God bless you. also going to leave this for the Friends of the Catskill. There are many other folks being honored. And I know Sherry is also a founding member trying to work towards the Interpretive Center, so I'll leave this with Sherry as well. So God bless. Thank you again.
Maurice Hinchey is of a value to the Catskills of similar magnitude in John Adams and Sherret Chase. He's been the political leader for as long as for 40-something years of honest environmentalism, and he's been a great leader. Maurice, would you like to say a few words?
Okay, thanks. Well, I'm not in a very good position to be making a lot of talking here because of the situation that I've gone through and all the things that I've been dealing with. I'm getting better, but you know, all of that stuff is still a serious situation that I've got to deal with. But I just want to, first of all, thank you all very much. Thank you for all the things that you've done, all the things that you've been involved in, and thank you very much for what you're doing today here. I deeply, deeply appreciate it. And I was a member of the House of Representatives up in Albany and then down in Washington, 20 years down in Washington. But trying to do what you are asking for, what you are understanding for, what you know what had to be done, to try to help you to deal with those things. And I deeply appreciate everything that you have done and all the good things that you have been involved in. And I deeply appreciate Sherret Chase because of all of the activities that he's been involved in, all the things that he's done, and because of the close friendship that he and I have had for a long, long time. So for all of these things, particularly for you, I am deeply, deeply grateful. Grateful for you, and I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity that I've got to be here today, to be with you, and to all of the things that you're going to be still doing. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Say that his gratitude is nothing compared to ours. Thank you, Maurice. During Sherry's tenure as the first president of the Catskill Center, there was no organization. Within a couple of years, Sherry thought that we needed a professional executive director. And that turned out to be Peter Borelli, who was executive director for the organization, I believe about 10 years, Peter? And he and Sherry worked together and worked on some of the programs that define the identity and the sense of what the Catskill Center is. Peter.
Hello?
Good day.
When I first heard about today's ceremony, I went to my bookcase and pulled out the Catskill Center plan, which was basically our Bible for a number of years, early years. Sherry says I wrote it, which, sure, I actually wrote it, but it is a condensation of the thinking of this board of directors for a number of years prior to and during the tenure of the temporary study commission on the Catskills. And so I remind you, as some of you have long enough memories, that it was 40 years ago next month that the board of the Catskill Center passed a lengthy resolution calling upon the temporary state commission to study the Catskills to recommend to the state legislature the adoption of regional land use controls and to suggest criteria to guide their formulation. It was buttressed by more than 50 recommendations contained in what we simply called the Catskill Center Plan. Among the members of the board who felt most strongly about the need for some form of regional land use controls, of course, were Sherret Chase and John Adams. It was an idea, indeed a need, Sherry first described in the article John referred to in American Forest magazine in 1967, later reprinted in the Catskill Mountain News and elsewhere. And it was the underlying rationale for the creation of the Catskill Center. For Sherry, regional planning has always been about more than good government or even the elusive balance of conservation and development. It is an ethical responsibility we all share, a responsibility that he calls for the exercise of social duties. 4 years later, in the late winter of 1977, the State Assembly Committee on the Environment held a hearing in Leeds to consider legislation that would have created a Catskill Regional Resource Management Commission, similar in concept but quite different in detail from the Adirondack Park Agency. More akin, I now think, to the New Jersey Pine Barrens Commission. About 400 attended. There were boos, catcalls, thunderous applause as people rose to support or condemn the work of the study commission. Sadly, the representative of the Constitutional Rights Association summed up the feelings of many by announcing that land use control is people control. Please leave us alone. To which Sherry warned, isolationism is as costly as it is impractical. The greatest danger facing some parts of the Catskills, particularly those economically depressed, is that state and federal government will accede to the wishes of the anti-planners and leave us alone, all alone. As you know, the state legislature failed to enact any form of regional plan or governance. It was a hard-felt setback for many of us. After the initial conflict over a regional plan, the center set out on a new course and became more entrepreneurial. Ever the scientist-born farmer, Sherry kept planting seeds, encouraging the efforts of others, and celebrating the region's rich history and diversity through a series of wonderful publications, and most of all, the Catskill Forum. I'm not sure the origin of it, but my failing memory tells me that it was probably Dr. Frank Sears' brainchild, a distinguished national authority on rural education when he retired from Columbia to the Catskills in 1965. Sear recognized the value of all things local. He believed that problems needed to be recognized and understood locally before they could be solved regionally. He soon hooked up with Sherry, and the two professors got the ball rolling. They made quite a pair. Sherry, the eternal optimist, forever encouraging the best in people, Sear, the crusty cigar-chomping curmudgeon, who never seemed to think that best was good enough. Though quite different in temperament and background, the two were very good listeners, and the open forums that they encouraged enabled people with diverse interests to speak out on a wide range of issues. It was not that consensus was pursued, but consensus was often achieved. For Sherry, the Catskill region was not simply an abstraction, but a living community of interest. Many interests from many different places. From New York City to Delhi, from the Beaverkill to the Schoharie, from Oneonta to Woodstock. Educators, lawyers, planners, hunters, fishermen, foresters, farmers, writers. Somehow Sherry was able to attract them all. I vividly remember my first week of work in the tiny Delaware County hamlet of Hobart. I pronounced it Hobart at the time. I reported to a vacant brick school building where I found a large pile of cardboard boxes in the middle of the lobby. As I began unpacking the boxes and discovering what the Catskill Center for Conservation and Development was all about, I wondered if I had made a big mistake. I believe it was Ruth Reynolds, the center's energetic clerk of the works, membership coordinator, treasurer, you name it, who explained that our presence in Hobart was a partnership with the village and the O'Connor Foundation. All we needed to do was to convert the old school into a community center and headquarters for the Catskill Center. So Ruth calmly said, "Let's get to it." I was a long way from Washington, D.C. But with the encouragement of Sherry, the forceful will of Frank Sear, the calming influence of Bob Bishop, a director of the foundation and vital member of the center's board, we got to it. I tell you this story because it reflects the way in which Sherry and the board operated. No task seemed too big or too small. We adopted what can best be described as an opportunistic action plan, often partnering with others, sometimes going it alone, hoping others would follow, often functioning as an incubator. When the Hanford Mills Museum in East Meredith was about to go under, the Catskill Center, at the insistence of Frank Sear, I might add, stepped in and assumed temporary operation, secured acquisition funds from where I had no idea, and saw it to that was placed on the National Register of Historic Places and became eligible for federal restoration funds. When the Thomas Cole House and Studio in Catskill was about to be sold as a private residence, the Catskill Center somehow stepped in until others, notably Ray Beecher and the Greene County Historical Society, could take over. And now it's a national historic site that celebrates the work of Thomas Cole and the entire Hudson River School. When the energy crisis of the mid-70s triggered an outbreak of high grading in the Catskill Forest, the Catskill Center launched an educational campaign and demonstration program called the Catskill Forest Association, now an independent organization. I might add that at that time we also got a little more directly involved and had a humongous wood processing machine that we called the Big Banana. It was built from the remnants of an old school bus, and it could cut the tree, it could split the logs, it could saw them, it could pile them, it could dump them into a pickup, into a dump truck, and away you went. It was not a successful operation. When state funding for the expansion of the forest preserve dried up in the early 70s, the Catskill Center, rather than retreat, advocated forcefully for expansion of the forest preserve and designation of wilderness areas beyond the recommendations of the 1960s Pomeroy Commission. And at a time when the land trust movement in the Catskills was in its infancy, the center began to acquire lands. First, the historic landscape of Platte Clove, site of some of the most famous Hudson River School paintings, and later 3,600 or 4,000 acres of land around Balsam Lake Mountain. By the early 80s, many of the lands identified by the Catskill Center for State Acquisition a decade earlier, including one of my favorites, the former Camp Harriman in the Blackhead Range, had been acquired. As environmental advocates, we joined with farmers, fishermen, and community groups in opposition to the Prattsville Pump Storage Project and the city's environmentally insensitive operation of its reservoirs. Even this wonderful multiple-use facility is a partnership between the center and the Earp family. As you may know, Armand Earp was one of the founders of the Catskill Center and an early supporter of Sherry's vision. As John mentioned earlier, much of the early staff work of the center, especially in the area of natural resource planning, was carried out by interns, initially from the Yale School of Forestry. As a teacher and unselfish mentor to many young people, Sherry took special interest in the program, as he has with students throughout his very long career. With the help of John Adams, he secured startup funding from the J.M. Kaplan Fund in New York. The program quickly gained regional, if not national, reputation, as evidenced by the careers of those who passed through. And one of the very first, as John mentioned, was Francis Beinecke, whose project was to work on a scenic wild scenic rivers designation of the Beaver Kill. And I wonder how that happened. Soon after the unsuccessful fight over the Catskill Commission, David Lokes, the renowned regional planner, who was then director of Mid-Hudson Patterns for Progress, and a member of the center's board, quipped, "If at first you don't succeed, quit." But only for a little while, because yesterday's heresy is tomorrow's cliche. 4 decades later, there is still no formal regional plan, but I know that many of the early recommendations of the Catskill Center and the Catskill Study Commission have been implemented. Agricultural districts have been formed. The New York City watershed and reservoirs are better managed. There is greater sensitivity to historic values and resources. The forest preserve has been expanded. One steady voice throughout all these years has been that of Sherret Chase. We know that he never quit. His commitment to the Catskills of tomorrow, in which everyone feels a strong sense of place, where the needs of man are in harmony with nature, has never waned. Many of his heresies have become the widely held beliefs of an entire generation. Thank you, Sherry.
Pete Lopez left this citation, assembly citation, honoring the museum for its effort in energy, education, and history.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for your contribution. Another one of the seeds of the Catskill Center.
I have to say, I have people like Sherry and Peter and the O'Connor Foundation, as well as many others, to thank for getting us to this point. Thank you.
Yes, you make a wonderful contribution. Thank you very much. Okay, next we're going to have David Gibson. David Sherry has had a long interest in the Adirondacks as well as the Catskills, as is well known. He took us on a hijira up there several months ago to talk to an Adirondacks organization about some of the similarities and differences between the two forest preserves, and I'm very glad that we have Dave Gibson to tell us a little bit about the Adirondacks. We're a bit short on time, so if you could respect that, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm David Gibson. I work with Adirondack Wild Friends of the Forest Preserve. Just one of the many commonalities we share. Article 14 is just at the top of the list. There's so many others. Peter, I learned from this man, Sherry, and Norman Valkenburg, that when an Adirondack advocate wants to do something in the Catskill Park, find a Catskill partner first and get an invitation. And I'm so honored to be asked by Helen and to come here. So it's a wonderful thing. I feel very honored and humbled by it. Sherry, your persistent, enduring, visionary link between our forest preserves is why I'm here. You've had to tolerate, and indeed you've had to overlook and forgive much negligence and one-sidedness on the part of your Adirondack brothers and sisters. I know of no others with such a record as yours who would have persisted in the face of such treatment. You joined the board of the Protection of the Adirondacks in 1972, when Arthur Crocker was chairman. I have the records in my little bag over there. 99% of the articles in that annual report dealt with the Adirondack Park Agency, just formed the previous year, related laws, issues, crises. Buried deep in the report is the May 6, 1972 article in the New York Times. The state will begin a Catskill survey panel to review problems. The follow-up to that news item in subsequent Protection of the Adirondacks reports were sporadic, to say the least. How many of your Adirondack colleagues have dropped whatever they were doing to rush to an urgent Catskill meeting? Not many times. I'm an example. I've attended about 10 Catskill meetings in my 26 years of advocacy for the Forest Preserve for the Adirondacks. Yet when the association called you to a meeting in the Adirondacks, you never failed to show up. You and Kenny came to overnight meetings in Old Forge, Lake George, Lake Placid, Saranac Lake, Racket Lake, Keene Valley, Albany, dozens of meetings in Schenectady in a terrible basement location for too many years, Sherry. That did not help to clear and enervate the mind, the body, or the spirit. That is until we bought Paul Schaefer's home and opened the Center for the Forest Preserve. And more on that in a bit. You not only came to those meetings, you were a full participant. If it were not for you, our majority in the Adirondacks would not have learned about a Bel Air resort and why it's significant. I have a copy of our latest letter for you on the supplemental EIS. We would never have thought about expanding the boundary of this Catskill Park to make geographic, political, and ecological sense. We think about that now in the Adirondack Park. We wouldn't have thought much about the significance of a Catskill Visitor Interpretive Center. We do today. All of us do. We wouldn't have had a conference at Frost Valley without the full participation and invitation of the Catskill Center, where we talked about what does the Forest Preserve mean to communities and people living here. And Alan White, you've picked up on that subject and moved it so far ahead, and Sherry, you have too, and so many of you. It was a joy to be part of that event. Then we made a fateful decision in 1998 to buy Paul Schaefer's home and create a Center for the Forest Preserve. We called it that in part because of this man's influence. It wasn't an Adirondack Center. It was meant to bind our two parks together. One day in 2002, Sherry invited us to Shokin. We walked through thick trees to find great slabs of bluestone left by in the New York City watershed forest. Who would have thought that we could have gotten those blocks and slabs and columns of bluestone and and trucked them up to the Center for the Forest Preserve. But he thought of it from early days, and it took a couple of years, Sherry, but he did that. And we have the Catskill Bluestone Amphitheater there at the center today. The center is now owned by Union College. As a representative today honored to be here from the Adirondacks, I thank you, Sherry, for your forbearance with our preoccupation with all things Adirondack, and your wonderful friendship, and Kenny's and Helen's. My colleagues and I salute you and your large vision, what Dan Plumley calls, in a phone call to me today, your big picture thinking, and your large embrace of our two parks, their vast watersheds without which New York State would not offer our people and the world such a wild green oasis of hope and opportunity. Thank you.
Sherry's such a diverse talent that I think we could be talking all day and not run out of new avenues. One of the things that struck me is that Sherry's life is not only extraordinary and the organization he founded so important to us all, but his life is also a reflection of kind of paths taken and not taken. That, you know, every organization makes decisions, every person makes decisions as to their life. Some of them are things that seem almost foreordained. Others are just completely unpredictable. Something hits you and your life changes, or you could be a happier one. You have a relationship you never expected to enter, and it works. Oh, all things are possible. See, I'm an optimist too. So, time for the poetry break. When Sherry was 2 years old, Robert Frost wrote this poem, which I think most of you know, The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that the passing there had worn them down really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden back. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted that I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. That's how life is. A combination of purposive elements and a series of random accidents. And organizational life is dealing with those and trying to make a contribution within one's lifetime. Sherry has managed at a time before it was fashionable to somehow follow many lives in many directions at the same time. One of those like is when Sherry talked to me about how he used to ride his horse from Ashokan to Woodstock. And that was a different time. That was a time when, say as a late teenager, you can be sure he didn't go down to Route 28 and go around to 375 and stop at the light. He went over the mountain. And those of you who have lived in Woodstock or anywhere in the Catskills know these wagon trails and places to get over a mountain quickly from one hollow to another. That is part of life that's vanishing now from the Catskills. I bet you nobody did that today. Everybody took their car and got on Route 28 and came to Arkville. The 30s, when Sherry was in his late teens and early 20s were a hard time, as you know. A depression, that makes ours look laughable. Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, as many of you know, is a book written, a new form of journalism and literature, written by James Agee, with pictures by Walker Evans, first published in 1941 when Sherry was 23. He subtitled it, An Independent Inquiry into Certain Normal Predicaments of Human Divinity. It was about sharecropper families, poorest of the poor in the Ozarks. If there is such a thing as divinity, and I kind of doubt it myself, then I would think that it's definitely shared equally by all people. Sherry wrote the following in one of his memoirs. Here I sit, wondering whether I am different from you, more real than you, more vital than you, and knowing from experience that we are the same. We are the same. Sherry, at the age of 25, was navigator, as we heard, on more than 40 bombing missions over southeastern Europe in World War II. What did he write about that? The possibility of destruction acknowledged, yet the common expectation of survival continued. I would survive because I was I. There's something to that. Sherry, in his late 20s and early 30s, was a young researcher who published papers on what his wife Kenny called virgin birth, corn with only a single parent, which allowed strains to improve faster. It was the birth of what became the remarkable ability of America and of other countries to feed the world's growing population. It was really that the ability to focus what had taken, say, Native Americans hundreds of years to develop strains in just a few years. Then Sherry went on to Iowa and then to work at the Kalb Seed Company, where he expanded its business and established it in new world markets. Particular strains were particularly useful in certain places and not in others. And Sherry, though not exactly the salesman type, proved a pretty savvy business person. That's yet another life. Sherry back in academic life at Harvard and at SUNY, breaking new ground in all kinds of fields and all kinds of interests. It was mentioned that I want to see the chestnut back in the Catskills in my time. And then, of course, Sherry is as a founder of the Catskill Center, in which these guys came up with the way Sherry expressed it, an association to benefit the region which failed to address the necessity of improving its economic situation would be overlooking a fundamental need. That's the connection. Sherry taught us we can both be fierce environmentalists and fierce advocates of constructive community economic development. That's a hell of an accomplishment in my book. Sherry was president of the Catskill Center for 12 years, a distinguished leader, as we've heard today. And finally, Sherry as elder statesman. I think he's earned that status by now, certainly. If he's ever going to, it is now. This summer, as I told you, we took this trip to the Adirondacks, and I was listening to Alan White and Sherret Chase talking. I never met two people who knew so much, and their knowledge overlapped quite a bit, so they could talk. It was really amazing. It kept me awake. I believe one of my spies say that he was most recently seen at the Olive Democratic Caucus. Is that true? Okay. kind of, today we have been praising a famous man, somebody who I think we all look up to and admire beyond, beyond the usual, because of the extraordinary character, his extraordinary personality, his sense of what's important, his ability to put up with all kinds of people. He puts up with me very well. I'm, flabbergasted anew every time. Here's another thing that Sherry wrote. Sherry cheerfully admits that he attended church when he was young because it was a good place to meet girls. And he wrote this which shows his kind of religious skepticism. This world was here before my birth, yet I was not, he wrote. The world will endure after my death. This also I accept. My friend Sherry believes in divinity. He believes that our lives are not an occasion for despair, but one-time shot at doing the best we can with as little ego as we can do it with. He's done it very well, and we today honor him for his life's accomplishment. I want to finish with perhaps a bit of deprecation of the kind of high status life, and that is, my favorite book is Finnegan's Wake, and there's a soliloquy at the very end of it by Anna Livia Plurabelle, at the end of a very long day in which this whole book takes place, and 4 summers later, Rhonda Robinson and Joe Campbell published The Skeleton Key to Finnegan's Wake, which was written in Woodstock in one summer, I think around 1943 or 1944. And that was published in the year when Sherry was the navigator in a plane making bombing runs over Europe. It's ironic how things go together. Well, anyway, Anna Livia's single line is, "How small it's all. And me letting on to myself always, and lilting on all the time." Thank you. Alan and Claude come up here.
Just a quick announcement. At noon, the fire alarm is going to go off, so that's in about 5 minutes. So don't be alarmed. It is quite loud. You can plug your ears.
It's an existential memory of World War II, so enjoy it. Sherry, we so deeply admire you, we find it hard to express, but we're going to do our best anyway. We'd like to honor you with an obligatory plaque. May we?
In true Catskill Center fashion, Sherry, we're going to give this plaque to you, but then take it back and hang it in the Catskill Center.
I've aged somewhat. Thank you very much, all of you.
Difference is the glasses.
Did you want to make some comments, Sherry?
Well, I had a couple of little remarks. I'll try my hand at this.
You deserve at least a rebuttal.
No, I just want to say, I remember people of strong character, important to the center at the beginning, such as the Incorporators, Arm & Earth, and King & Gould, and Warren Anderson in the background, and locally Ross Sanford. Today, I remember early members Joe Aronson. We have another Joe Aronson here today. I'm talking about his father, and Ben Webster. Ben sketched out our first logo on a paper napkin. A simple, elegant, three-line representation of our upland valleys and rounded mountains. I remember especially Bob Bishop and his family, always loyal and supportive. Frank Sear, Doug McKenzie, Madeline Coutan, and Catherine Harwood, Minor Wine Thomas, Roland Van Sant, Alf Evers, and our remarkable Ruth Reynolds, first staff. The Toms, Tom Miner and Tom Hatley, Bill Ginsberg and John New, and more. And here with us today, from the past, Peter Borelli and John Adams. For my memories tomorrow, I add Eddie Sveikauskas, Jim Infante, Alan White, David Gibson, Bill Rudge, and Claude, and all of you. Thank you very much.
Sherry, it's a humbling task to work towards the legacy of opportunity you've helped us create, and we're very pleased to honor you today. Our next task today is to head towards lunch, and what I will tell you is that after lunch we are going to hear some presentations on additional partnerships from the MARC project, the Catskill Interpretive Center. We're going to hear about riparian buffers. And so we would ask you to reconvene back here in about 45 minutes. So thank you, and Sherry, congratulations again.
Busy man, Dave.
Hey, Jim.
Hello there.
Good day.
Great.
Maurice,
Hi, how are you
I'm
doing?
so glad to see you today, and you're doing great, man.
Yes, indeed. I'm getting
beautiful.
better. Thanks.
What a great
so
guy.
Great to see you.
Ah, well, thanks.
Delighted to see you.
Well,
Thank
good.
You very
Good
much.
for you.
And delighted to be here.
And have some lunch.
Very fun to walk in here and look at the plans.
They forgot to put the D there.
Maurice D. Hinchey. Okay.
What does the D stand
It
for?
will be there in the future.
That's all right. I don't use the D very much.
What does it stand for?
D. Dunley.
Dunley.
Yeah.
Nice.
Maurice Dunley Hinchey. Yeah.
Remember, I was hoping it would be David, but I can
David,
deal with Dunley.
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I thought I'd like to show the Congressman.
Thank you so much for coming. It's so wonderful that you came today. And thanks to Bill Rudge, we were able to put these on display for today.
Yeah, thank you.
And
very nice.
And we couldn't be happier. These are the latest stage of development of these plans for the Interpretive Center.
Yeah, very nice. Very important. Yeah.
Well, thanks to you. You are the godfather of this project.
Oh, thanks. Well, I appreciate you.
Hey, I better invite you over for a cup of coffee right away.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
We have a visitor center at the Madaba Farms where we produce ground maple syrup. You'd think you're in Napa when you arrive, but it's all about maple syrup.
In the early 70s, Donald Boughton was producing about 300 gallons of syrup.
Am I? Well, I'll try. I don't know how good I am, but
Friends of mine ran a wholesale
There you go.
3 stories high.
And the grand tree.
So now
he's got
It's a wonderful day. 44 years of work dedicated to making the Catskill Center a premier environmental organization is fantastic, and I wanted especially to be here to salute Sherry on his 44th anniversary.
Lowell and see if he can help me figure everything out.
I just talked to him.
You don't mind?
No, I don't mind.
I won't share it beyond him, and I won't
And
let
that'll
him
work
keep
for,
it.
for both of us, so because I'd like a copy.
copy?
But, yeah, right. So, but
If you
one
don't mind.
between the two of us, and I can get another one made.
Well,
And one of the reasons that I support the MARC project, and obviously I support Peg Ellsworth, their director, is because the MARC project is one of the nonprofits in the Catskills that dares to go to our villages and hamlets, do the grant writing, do the administration, and help them identify their opportunities to move forward as communities. Another example, I think, of the MARC project's outstanding contribution to the Catskills is an area the Catskill Center has long looked at and thought more needed to be done, and that was in the area of expanding internet access, broadband access to our underserved areas. And I think this is one of the things that has the potential to hold us back economically if our visitors and our second home part-time residents can't connect in the ways that they connect in the more urban parts of the state. The MARC project successfully wrote with Margaretville Telephone a grant application last year and has embarked on expanding broadband internet access to parts of the Catskills that it wouldn't happen otherwise. And so without further introduction, I'm going to invite Peg Ellsworth, who is the director of the MARC project, to come up and talk a little bit about her organization and the partnerships that we have with them. And I will also say that I'm very pleased to say the MARC project is one of our nonprofit partners working out of the IRF Center. Peg.
Thank you, Alan. You're very kind. First of all, I'm honored to participate in this celebration of Sherret Chase's contribution to the Catskill Center. He is a model for unselfish, long-standing dedication, not only within the Catskill Center, but the entire not-for-profit sector. In fact, anyone who serves on a board of directors should look to him as a shining example of sensitive and effective board participation and leadership. Thank you, Sherrett. 35 years ago, the MARC project was founded and looked to the Catskill Center to umbrella the organization until it could get established as its own 501c3. Their office was housed in this building for a time until it moved its headquarters to Main Street, Margaretville. 3.5 years ago, MARC's reach and organizational activities broadened substantially, and the need to be housed somewhere more centrally located became obvious. It was then when Alan White took the helm here, and he and I sat down and had a conversation about us moving back here. And before too long, we were packing our files, and we ended up in Arkville. Since that time, the partnership between the two organizations has grown into a symbiotic and mutually beneficial relationship that also serves as a model for how not-for-profits can work to choreograph some real change in the region. I encourage anyone to walk into this building on any given day, and you'll hear staff and administrators engaging in conversations about downtown revitalization projects, environmental education programs, stewardship, and yoga. This daily interaction and strong open relationship position MARC and the Catskill Center to truly make a difference, and I'm honored to be here. So, to Alan White and the entire staff at the Catskill Center, I thank you for your gracious generosity and embracing us as your neighbors and colleagues, but most of all, I'm grateful for your friendship. We have grown very close. Here's where I say something nice about Alan, and it really was kind of choked out this morning. No, I'm kidding. Alan, we've had some interesting, engaging, and at times disruptive conversations. But to have access to this type of knowledge and experience of many things, not everything, I don't want your head to swell, has enabled me to grow not only as a director, but as an individual. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you very much. And we look forward to years and years of great partnerships and great projects. Thank you.
One of the areas that the Catskill Center has long dreamed is the creation of a Catskill Interpretive Center. And as I'm fond of saying, we have all the public land that's the significance of a national park, but we aren't really great at pulling it together and figuring out how to make it operate. It's been Sherry's vision, along with the rest of the Catskill Center and many other partners, that we really need and deserve an opportunity to have an interpretive center where visitors can come and learn what we have to offer. A group called the Friends of the Interpretive Center are basically operating under the umbrella of the Catskill Center financially, but for almost 30 years they've been tolling away at this vision of an interpretive center. They've gone through various political processes where they got really close. And usually what happens is we make a little bit of progress on an interpretive center, and there's a change of administration, there's a budget challenge, and we don't quite get to pull the trigger. The good news from all that story is that next spring we will be breaking ground on the first phase of the Interpretive Center. And I think this is an example of the Catskill Center reaching out, trying to do something that seemingly may be impossible, but not quite. Working with a bunch of partners to pull this off. And at this point in time, we're feeling very good. And I hope you had a chance to look at the preliminary designs in the conference room. I'm going to invite Bill Rudge from New York State DEC, Natural Resource Supervisor for Region 3, to come up and talk a little bit about this partnership. And while Bill's coming up, I'm also going to tell you that in my many years of professional work, I have found Bill to be one of the unsung heroes for partnership in the Catskills, and I'm really pleased to have him join our program today. Bill?
Well, thank you, Alan. And, you know, I couldn't say more about how rewarding it is for me to work with such sincere and hardworking partners that we have with the Catskill Center and the Friends of the Catskill Interpretive Center, and a host of other organizations that have really, I think, brought new life to the Catskill Interpretive Center project in a way that I think is actually much stronger than it was in the past. No criticism intended for the early goings, but at the early goings of the project, as many of you may recall, it was really a DEC project that we formed a Catskill Interpretive Center Citizens Advisory Committee to help guide the department in seeing that dream in implementing a Catskill Interpretive Center project, and that was a good model for the time. But I think in hindsight, what we all recognize now is that a model that emphasizes the department or the state of New York building and managing a facility in the Catskills is not one that's going to be successful. That we're going to have much greater chance of success, and I think we'll get a much better project out of a true partnership, a public-private partnership. Or as Jim Infant likes to remind me, it's now a private-public partnership, because the private part of the equation is probably doing the lion's share of the work, and I want to acknowledge that. He's absolutely right, and we're extremely appreciative of that. But I do want to go back to just give everyone a little bit of background of the Catskill Interpretive Center and how we got to where we are now. And I want to recognize, you know, Sherret Chase and the Catskill Center for their role in getting us to where we are now. You know, you heard Peter Borelli mention the Temporary State Commission to Study the Catskills, and John Adams referenced that organization as well, that effort. And Sherrett was, as I think we all know, was a big player behind that Temporary Study Commission. And you know, I'll never know for sure. The record probably won't show it, but there's no question in my mind that if it wasn't Sherrett's idea on his own, it was Sherrett played a role in that idea, making it onto the Temporary Study Commission's agenda and resulting in the Temporary Study Commission's decision to include that in one of their recommendations going forward. And you know, that's over 40 years ago. And I think that's a testament to Sherrett's willingness to toil, you know, tirelessly to see his vision completed. And I, you know, again, I'm happy to report that I think the effort, where we are now, is in a stronger position than we've ever been in. And while we're not there yet, we still got a bit of a hill to climb to see the center constructed at the site. I think we're very close, and that's because of a host of partners that have come together to see this project through. And I think one of the ways it got started, that partnership got started in modern times, I'm not going to go back 40 years, but in modern times, was the decision to take a small step. This was done by the Friends of the Catskill Interpretive Center. Take a small step and develop a kiosk at the site to establish a presence and to start the process. And to do that, we worked on a partnership with the SUNY Delhi, who I think has been mentioned before, the Catskill Watershed Corporation, obviously the Catskill Center, and the other partner that I think we up until then hadn't worked closely with, despite their presence in the park, is the New York City Department of Environmental Protection. And many of you got a copy of the Department of Environmental Conservation's most recent brochure, the Catskill Park, that we just came out with. And I hope that one of the things that should jump out at you that we've done differently than past brochures is we've not only have we acknowledged the New York City DEP's significant watershed holdings and contribution to the park, but we've explained how the public can use those lands. And maybe none of you are aware of this, but New York City DEP has really come a long ways towards inviting the public to use their lands and being more of a community member instead of, you know, a fenced out resource that we all just have to live with. And to that point, when we approached them to help us fund the brochure, they jumped right in and said, we'd be happy to help you fund that Catskill Park brochure. So they're a true partner now, and as we go forward, they will be a strong partner as we continue to develop the Catskill Interpretive Center and run it as an entity for the region. Going back to that Catskill kiosk project, those partners showed that a partnership could move forward with a project at the Catskill Interpretive Center site and make it effective for the region. And I think that's what's given our agency the confidence that the partnership is real, that you're serious, that you're going to go to a great level to make this project happen. And some of you probably are more familiar with government than I am, but I'll tell you, when government has a partner working with it, we do a much better job. There's no question in my mind. That's something I've learned over the years, that the best projects we do are the ones we do in partnership with a host of organizations, and I think the Catskill Interpretive Center is going to be a model for that, and I really appreciate everyone that's contributed to that. Just to fill in a few of the quick up-to-date gaps, the Friends, working with Congressman Maurice Hinchey, got a federal housing and urban development grant in 2009 to help fund the Catskill Interpretive Center project of $380,000. And this year, our Commissioner Martens, was able to allocate $420,000 of the Environmental Protection Fund towards construction of the Catskill Interpretive Center. And so we now have the financial resources we needed to make the project go. The department's engineering staff is actively working on designs for the building. We're interacting with the Friends group on a regular basis, and I hope you get a chance to talk to some of the other people like Jim and Fawn and Alan that have been working with us to hear their side of the story. But I really feel that our engineers have taken the feedback we've gotten from the Friends group and altered the plans to better reflect what the partnership wants, not what the department wants. And I think it's a much better building already for that. As Alan said, we hope to finish those designs this fall. We expect to go out with an invitation for bids in October of this fall, and that should result in us awarding a contract in February and groundbreaking in the spring of 2014. And with a little luck, I know it's already on our commissioner's agenda to participate in a ribbon cutting ceremony for either the groundbreaking in the spring or an opening of the facility, hopefully if we get the right contractor in the fall of 2014. That would be our goal. So one last thing I want to wrap up with. Again, these things happen not because the bureaucracy takes an idea and runs with it on their own. It's because it gets down to individuals, partners that help foster and facilitate this kind of a project. And Commissioner Martens, when he found out I was coming today to speak at the Catskill Center's annual meeting, he asked me to present Sherrett with a certificate of appreciation for all his work for the Catskills, and in particular, and I'll read this, for over 50 years of inspirational leadership as an advocate for the Catskills, reminding us of the outstanding natural and cultural resources of the area and the importance to past, present, and future generations of New Yorkers, including your tireless efforts to establish a Catskill Interpretive Center. So thank you, Sherrett. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Bill. And that certainly is an indication of Sherrett's extreme patience for the bigger projects that we've worked this long. But I think it's also a very strong signal of partnership that we are going to pull the trigger on this and get this thing done. And I take it as a personal responsibility to try to move forward with Sherrett's vision whenever I can. The final program topic for today is we wanted to give you a brief update on what we consider to be a relatively major project in the wings. About a year ago, we embarked on a study to take a look at the way New York City was buying land in the Catskills, and we were asking ourselves the question, what does the Catskills look like when they're done? And that's a politically charged question. It's one that I think people struggle with. And it was our perspective that there may be a tool missing in the toolbox, and that is there are no programs that presently focus directly on the acquisition of land along streams. It seems counterintuitive that we have a New York City watershed program. They buy entire parcels, but they don't have the ability to focus in and buy parts of parcels along streams. So essentially, there are major stretches of streams that we think are environmentally sensitive, that are important from a conservation perspective, and we did a study to look at, could it be done? And so with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Nicole McShane, who did the study for us, and she's going to give you a brief update. Nicole?
My arms were flailing in the back, and I was hoping he wouldn't give too much of an introduction because it would be my entire update. So I promise this will be very brief. But like Alan mentioned, the last 14 months we did a study report on the Riparian Buffer Program Development Initiative report. And so this is looking at a topic that has been long circulating in the Catskills of how do we protect sensitive riparian habitat along streams and leave room for future development as well. So this kind of seems like the Catskill Center's bread and butter, and we took it on not because it was going to be easy, but because we felt that it was a vital study. So we produced this report over 14 months, and it's available for free download on our website, or we have some paper copies if you're interested in that today as well. So I just wanted to talk about what this all means. This report was received very well by our stakeholders, by our working group that helped to formulate it, and it will kind of dictate how a $5 million pilot program will begin in the west of Hudson watershed over the next 3 years. So stay tuned to our website for updates about how we're going to be involved in the riparian buffer program and how our findings are going to be used. Just very quickly, a couple of the interesting findings of our report, just the highlights, were that we found in order to promote high water quality, you didn't necessarily need to buy entire parcels. And that's something that the city was interested in doing, to make transactions easier, was to buy whole parcels. So instead, we applied a scientific design method based on a set of criteria that would change based on the type of stream. Obviously, we know not all streams are the same. Sounds easy, but when you get wrapped up in politics and conversation, sometimes that can be lost. So we used a scientific method and showed what land is really necessary to purchase for permanent protection, as opposed to what upland areas you could keep as a place for future development. Another highlight was that the 100-year floodplain is something that we really wanted to capture as much as we could into this design. So when we mapped areas as case studies in this report, we saw that any future development in the 100-year floodplain probably wasn't going to be consistent with protection of high water quality, but also with flood hazard mitigation. So that's in the report if you're interested. If you want a paper copy, I'd be happy to get you one. And one more update that I wanted to give outside of the riparian program is just to touch on what Alan mentioned before about our inheritance of a beautiful 60-acre parcel of land in the town of Woodstock. We just closed on that last week, and we're very excited. It's a wonderful natural resource for the town of Woodstock, and our interests in that site are to use it to demonstrate the importance of functional riparian habitat, also to keep it open for public access. So stay tuned on our website for more projects there. We intend to, have it be a really special place to add to our properties. And the final thing, on your way out, please feel free to check out our displays. The CIC displays inside. We have a purple prism trap, right? You can just barely see it right there. Check that out, it's pretty neat. And I have some information about our brand new plug-in hybrid car, which uses some solar energy to get around. So it's very exciting. If you're interested, see one of us afterward. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. And that concludes our program today. The staff will be around for a couple more hours, I assume, and will be willing to answer any questions you have on any of the programs or issues that came up today. And one final thank you to Sherret Chase for all you've done for us. Thank you.
This is culture stone, a real stone?
This is real stone.
Real stone. And the roof, cedar shake? Cedar shake. And this material on the siding? Wood. Shiplap wood.
Sherret Chase is a hero, one of the greatest Catskill advocates we've ever known and ever will know. And his establishment of the Catskill Center, which has been around for my entire life and has been the driving force for sustaining and maintaining this region. Really, it all has to do with Sherret, and we love him and we're proud of him and glad to honor him today.
Richard, anything to say?
Ditto. That's it.